Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's good to see you all. I'm going to jump over to my gallery view, and hey, there you are. Friends, thank you so much for being with us today. This is your Nature Journal Educators Forum, and Zoom is still, looks like Zoom has got us populated in here. This is a dynamic community of educators of all stripes. We meet every week to discuss best practices in nature journaling and nature connection education. And today we're going to be discussing the critical topic of accessibility and how we engage with that as a nature journaling community and as nature journaling educators. And with us today are your regular host, myself, Billy Joe Reed, and Avea Moore. Avea's microphone isn't working with us today, so you will find her, she will be dropping some things in the chat, which we'll be trying to bring into the discussion, but she's not going to be able to directly comment on the conversation today, but this is something that she is passionate about and has been really pushing us to think about and address for some time. So Avea, thank you so much for being here. We also have two guest hosts today. Rosa and Scott will be introducing themselves in just a moment, and they have also been doing some deep thinking about these issues of accessibility in our community and be helping us coordinate the conversation today. Thank you all for being here. What we're going to do is we're going to start just with I know that both Rosa and Scott have been doing a lot of behind the scenes thinking about this topic, and we'd love to kind of hear how you're initially framing it. This is a discussion. If anybody would like to participate in the discussion, all you have to do is raise your hand. I'm going to be watching the gallery view, so if you don't have that raise hand button, you can just kind of go like this, and I will probably see you. You can also use your raise hand button that looks kind of like this. Hey, and you can get to that through the reactions button on the bottom of your screen. There's something that says raise hand, and it also says lower hand. So there, it went away. We will try to get to everybody who's got ideas to share. In our conversations here, I want to remind everybody that we have one fundamental rule in how we interact with each other. That is respect. We treat each other with kindness, we treat each other with respect, and that makes all the difference. So with that, let's just do a little bit of introductions. Rosa, would you like to tell us what kind of brings you to this community and the perspective that you bring to that?
Hi. So I'm Rosa Quiñones. I live in the East Bay of the San Francisco area, and I first heard about nature journaling when I was cat sitting for a friend. She is a landscape architect and a watercolor artist, and she had your book, John. And so I flipped through it and I thought, wow, this is for artists. This is for people who are just beyond. I felt super intimidated, and I, sort of filed that away, but I saw that you were leading groups in the area. And at one point, Laura posted about going to the first Wild Wonder. And when she did, I thought, wow, I'm so drawn to this. But gosh, those people must be really good, artists and scientists. And, that doesn't feel like it's for me. Also, it would have been expensive for me to go to it. And I have access issues that would make it hard for me to do like a 5-day in-person conference. The next year, we all know what happened. And Wild Wonder was online. And I thought, you know what? I could do that. I could do this online conference. And I went, and has been life-changing.
Mm.
I have taken on, this new part of my life, and it has been such a gift. And I would like to give that gift back to more people. So my personal experiences that have brought me here around disability are, first, that I grew up with my mother who was disabled. We found at some point that she had rheumatoid arthritis, and that was in the 80s. Treatments were not what they are now. And this was quite literally crippling. I saw her hands degenerate. I saw her lose, mobility access to the community. And we knew even then that that's an inheritable illness. So as a teenager, I already had this idea in mind that, like, at some point I might be disabled like my mom. My own sort of bodily woes turned up in my early 20s, and didn't get diagnosed well for quite a while. But that's more to do with medical science, which has now caught up. So what I have is psoriatic arthritis, and we are so lucky. There are so much better treatments available now. And those treatments have been life-changing for people with these illnesses. So I'm not going to delve too deep into what those are, but there are many people who have experienced lengthy periods of disability who are now regaining access to a broader swath of life. I also have migraine disease, and that was incredibly limiting for me for a long while. But new drugs had been in the pipeline for a long time. And I'm on a monoclonal antibody drug, which has reduced the number of migraines I have each month, and really pared away at that limiting factor. I'm not alone. There are many people who've been disabled by migraines and similar illnesses who are now coming back to life in a way. And then more broadly, we've all just been experiencing an enormous trauma, sort of rupture of our communities and society due to COVID. And so when I think about access broadly, I understand both that there are people who have been disabled by COVID, either in the short term or sadly in the longer term. And those people need resources for making meaningful lives. And yeah, so I'm gonna swap to a sort of academically how I think about things. I pursued a PhD in sociology, and I left that program after a couple of years. But one of the things I gained from doing that work was the concept of the sociological imagination, which is, very quickly put, a way to understand how an individual's life and experiences and connections can be spun out to look at how society works. What are our roles in all these overlapping parts of the world? And I feel that nature journaling helps us develop that by giving us scientific reasoning tools, but also observational tools, so that we can start at one spot and end up contemplating the universe. I think that's beautiful, and that more people need the opportunity to try out this lens. In my sociology work, I was very interested in educational technology, and I'm so heartened by all of the educational or just Zoom, which wasn't initially meant to be an educational platform, but which has become one. And so here I am. I've been nature journaling for a while, and learning to draw as, a 50-year-old. And that's been an incredible experience all on its own. If we're all lucky enough to age, then I hope that we can all continue to learn things and find things that we're excited about. That's who I am. And I have a short poem. This poem is by E. Cummings, and I love it so much that I have the first line of it tattooed on my arm. Love is a place, and through this place of love, move with brightness of peace, all places. Yes is a world, and in this world of yes, live, skillfully curled, all worlds. When I look at a composite flower and I see all of those tiny flowers in the disc, I feel like that is an invitation to mathematics and fractals, to awe, to the wonder of people genetically developing new species. It's all right there in a single flower. Let's help more people find that way of looking at the world.
Rosa, I agree with you so strongly. This is such a powerful tool. It changes worlds and lives and builds community. It pulls us together and helps us act, I think, more compassionately towards the world around us, and perhaps hopefully to others as well. And we really need this at this time. Thank you for sharing that. I would also like at this time to introduce Scott. Scott, perhaps tell us a little bit about what your path to here and what makes you particularly passionate about this topic that you've already had a lot to share about.
Well, thanks everybody. My name's Scott Burke, and I'm currently living in Waukee, Iowa, kind of a suburb of Des Moines, right in the center of the state. This whole thing about nature journaling for me is, in terms of accessibility, I guess kind of boils down to that word of community. And with lack of accessibility, it's hard to find our way into that community sometimes. And as Rosa hinted, to me, Zoom meetings, I never heard of Zoom before COVID. And COVID changed a lot of things in terms of accessibility for a lot of people. Zoom kind of provided some accessibility. And a good aspect of that for me in terms of nature journaling is it allowed me to sit in with on events like Wild Wonder Workshop, the conference. And to me, that was an eye-opener in terms of, okay, what could I possibly do in my local community to engage more people in nature journaling that have accessibility issues? My accessibility issues stem from MS. I was a middle school math and science teacher. I taught in different locales around the country. I taught in the New York City area. I taught in Fargo, North Dakota, Lake Wales, Florida, and my last teaching position was in Des Moines, Iowa. And all the way through this process, I've been an artist. And about 8 years ago, I got diagnosed with MS. I'd been struggling with issues, physical issues before that for probably 5 years to 6 years prior to that. Started losing my eyesight. That is when they were able to finally diagnose it as MS. Some of the testing procedures got better. as an artist and a nature journaler, when your eyesight starts going and your mobility starts going, so you can't go out hiking, it changes your access to community. And for anybody, you know, we all have something that we deal with that limits us in some way. The key to that is, how can I get myself to find the adaptations that I can make to not let that limit me? And without the lack of a community to help you do that, sometimes becomes a struggle, and isolation can set in, which is not a good place for anybody to go. And to me, sitting in the Wild Wonder workshops on those Zoom meetings, I've been doing it since it went to Zoom. It just really became apparent to me, and it kind of lit a fire within me that, man, we could really benefit from an online group that could help people with accessibility issues. There are a lot of people that cannot get out in nature, simply just can't do it. Some people can do it with adaptations, but they might struggle to find those adaptations. You know, to me, a nature journal group online that could help address some of these issues will build a very good sense of community for people like that. And, you know, there's so many things that I envision can happen in a group like that. And I know, talking with a lot of different people, we had a very short breakout session during the last Wild Wonder where some of us talked about these issues. And, you know, there's a lot of good ideas out there. And just giving access to these ideas and a place to brainstorm ideas, a place to share experiences, but not wallow in experiences, maybe wallow in the strengths of the strengths we've developed in those experiences. How have we adapted? You know, we can each add to the buffet of those ideas, and the people in this community can take what we need, take what we want, and adapt what we can in our own walk, get ourselves back out in nature if possible. And if not, sit in this community in the virtual world and still feel that we are getting involved in nature through nature journaling. Becoming a sense of the community within the people in that circle, but that kind of an environment will also, I feel, and allow us to become engaged back in that community of the world around us. Because my elders always brought me up with a thought of, we are interconnected with everything. We're all related. We're related to the rocks. We're related to the winged ones, to the four-legged. You know, we are all interconnected. We're all part of this earth. That's our community. And to me, doing a simple thing like creating an online group where some of these accessibility issues could be addressed, and, you know, maybe providing virtual tours on these meetings, you know, and some of the things that we've seen done in the Wild Wonder workshops, you know, that to me would be a fantastic endeavor for all of us to engage in. And so that's what brings me to the table. Thanks for listening.
So this is, my brain's starting to popcorn here. This is fun. So, and folks out there, as these ideas are starting to crystallize in your head, please feel free to pop your hand up and share your thoughts in. So we're thinking about, like, is there a community forum where we can, to use Scott's words, wallow in our strengths and adaptations, right? So to share what is working and solutions. You're also thinking about as the community is doing things, thinking about structures that are going to be open to more people. An example of that is Zoom, but also in live events are considerations for people is accessibility something that people in our community can count on? Or let's say there's something where we're going to be going on a hike and it's not something that is at all accessible. Is that event kind of clearly differentiated from things that that everybody could participate in, and also looking at and just sort of being aware of it when we are off the kind of path that makes an experience more broadly accessible? Billy Joe, your thoughts?
Hey, so they're not my thoughts, but they are Avea's. And so I am also not only my own voice today, but I am Avea's voice today. So Avea just said in the chat that there are 3 areas of accessibility that she would really like to make sure that we're keeping in mind for this discussion. And the first is access to nature, the second being access to nature journaling, and the third being access to the nature journaling community, which I think is what Scott was mentioning about the community part of it. So I think if we're starting to keep those things kind of in mind, then I had a thought for myself too. So I'd like to add that in as well. So coming back to Scott's thought about a nature journaling online community, it sort of triggered like thoughts because during COVID, my job as an outdoor educator turned completely online. And so a lot of the nature journaling that I was doing with kiddos was online. And what I was doing an intro to nature journaling, sort of like this. And then I had the access to be able to take my phone with internet outdoors. And I would take the kids on a virtual hike and they would nature journal while we were doing that. And then I had some like close up camera lenses, things like that we could get extra close. We would spend time with like just a couple of plants, right? And really sort of diving in deep with that. And I think if I'm hearing Scott right, that's kind of what you were thinking, Scott, is that we could sort of, yeah, okay, great. So it would be cool, like if we were able to set something like that up, but because we all live in like such different areas, like not only would we get a virtual tour, but we would get a virtual tour of a completely different area or a completely different country, which would be really cool, right? And especially with everybody having different seasons and things like that. So that I just thought is potentially something that I think we could add into sort of what Scott was thinking about. And I agree with the online. I live in Canada, so going to a Wild Wonders conference in California for 5 days is not going to be something I can do, but I can do the online version, right? And so being online was really big for me when that sort of all came about, right? So I agree with everybody in terms of that. Avea, give me a thumbs up. Is there anything else that you wanted me to add on to there? I think we're okay. Okay, good. I got Avea's. Okay, great. And then I think Sydney wanted to say something as well, right? So we can pop over to Sydney. I know we made sure that she is unmuted, asked to unmute.
Hello.
Oh, there we go.
I don't have anything specific at the moment, but I was in the accessibility group at Wild Wonder talking about the possibility of a online club specifically for people with accessibility challenges. And I do have thoughts as we move into different topics of some suggestions that I have thought of for big ideas like the online nature journaling club, and then what we can do with local club leaders to encourage them to make their things more accessible and all that kind of stuff. And just to mention, I don't have any specific diagnoses at the moment. Like Rosa, I'm having a hard time with the health industry trying to nail down what exactly is going on with me. But I do have challenges that range from mental challenges to physical, and every day is different for me. So I never know when I wake up whether I will be able to make it outside or if it's an inside day. So that is my accessibility challenges at the moment. And again, I don't have specifics because healthcare in America is difficult, but I'm getting there.
I'd like to jump in at this point. So speaking to you directly, Sidney, but also to the group at large, we don't need to hear your diagnosis. I did share some specifics because I feel comfortable doing that. But I'd like us to all remember that giving personal health details in order to, get our stickers so we can be in the Disability Nature Journaling Club is just not necessary. And yeah, popping back up to a sort of umbrella, overview idea of access. I really love Irvea's succinct observation about these aspects of access. The framework that I pulled together was thinking about, let's see. So here are the three things. Physical access, which covers all of the bodily things that might interfere with nature journaling. So mobility or pain or sensory deficits or chronic illness, anything that's sort of body focused. Monetary access. And that seems self-explanatory on the face of it, but that can get tricky. And I feel like that kind of bleeds into my third concept, which is emotional or psychosocial access. So what kind of people get to hang out in nature and draw and write? Who can afford leisure time? This brings us into thinking about racial and socioeconomic factors. But it also, overlaps some of our individual emotional challenges, like imposter syndrome, which we've talked about a lot as a community, but also anxiety or depression or self-defeating thinking. Those are things that many of us struggle with. I see in the chat that folks have pointed out that, that can be so broad. And what we're already building here by leading with kindness is inviting everybody in and making that invitation more explicit and more fleshed out is going to be great. Like getting to bring more people in is just going to be awesome. So I want to also point out the phrase universal design. That's probably not a new phrase for many of you, but I want us to really think hard about that. It's the idea that in this case, lowering a barrier to any of the things that we've brought up will help people that we didn't anticipate, because these are all interconnected things. And there's a terrific 99% Invisible podcast episode on universal design. It's a fun listen. And there he explains how curb cuts, right, at the end of sidewalks going into the street, where you don't have to step over the curve, but you can roll down it if you're using a wheelchair, made sidewalks more accessible to parents pushing strollers or travelers or people with a heavy load who are bringing things around in a cart or a suitcase. And so this thing that someone might have said, oh, I don't see why we should have to, spend all this money and make all these curb cuts. And really, how many people even use wheelchairs? When you actually make those curb cuts, it turns out a whole lot of other people benefit. I look forward to us identifying the curb cuts where we can add some kind of access, and then we find out who comes to join us. Somebody else talk for a bit.
Yeah, I think your idea of the curb cuts is a great example of making a difference that we all benefit from. And if we are, but also I like your idea of, if there's sort of a culture that we develop of where we are looking for, like, what are our own curb cuts in this community, right? That we really value trying to find ways to make this be something where there are fewer and fewer barriers to us picking up our pen and going out and connecting with the world and each other. And that is all these ideas of physical things just sort of in our minds, whether that is the having to make a pretty picture, or thinking that I'm not sciencey enough, or looking around in the group and saying, there's nobody there that looks like me. All of those things are barriers, and I want it to be our kind of mutual mission to sort of pull those apart. Let's use Avea's framework, starting with thinking about barriers. Let's just sort of throw out some ideas of what are some barriers to nature journaling, and barriers to community. So I would like everybody to let's take a minute. Again, we've got these 3 categories: barriers to nature journaling, barriers to community. Stew on that for a second. Whichever one is speaking to you the most, what I would like you to do is just write down some bullet points about that one. All right, barriers to nature journaling, barriers to community. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pop up 3 breakout groups, and on each of those topics, we'll drop over to those for about 10 minutes, and then come back here and share out ideas that have come from those 3. So take a moment here, and I'm going to be creating breakout rooms in just a moment, but don't jump into them yet. Still be writing those bullet points, those ideas down. Again, either about barriers to nature journaling, or community. Give you a couple more moments to free write on that. Hold on, my 2 little daughters have just come home on their bicycles by themselves from school. Very exciting moment, so I'm going to pop over to those. And I'll be back in just a second. I'm going to open all these rooms, and you can drop into whichever one is calling you, and I will be back. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to our discussion of accessibility in nature journaling, and community. What I'd love to do is to hear from someone from each group who, if there are parts of the conversation that you had that you feel comfortable sharing with the group, let's do that. I think that we have sort of seen that we've kind of cracked a rather large egg here, and we'll be returning to this conversation more in the future. And but from the group that was discussing accessibility to nature, is there anybody who is in that discussion who feels comfortable sharing out with the rest of the group? Sarah, let me spotlight you. Sarah, thank you so much for reporting out to the group. You can now unmute.
Oh.
We hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so about barriers to nature, I love what Stephanie brought up, and these are some direct quotes. Do we have to go out and be in nature? We don't. As she said, no matter where you are, this is the nature of it. So there's nature in me being in this room, being here. She also suggested how to bring nature back into us. And that spoke a lot to me too. She does a virtual hike. I'm going to steal your blender, Stephanie. She does a virtual hike with her high school students, and does basically like a slideshow of the hike, and that just really speaks volumes to me too, because it brings nature to the people who maybe can't get out there. Some of the things that I think about in trying to get a nature journal club together where I live is looking at things like, is it a safe place to be? Is it a safe parking lot? At what time of day is it safest for people to be there? Do we need to have special equipment to get out to a site to nature journal? Is there a day use fee or a parking pass that's required? And if so, does everybody know what that cost is? Because different agencies in our county have different day use fees, even within their agency. Does anybody need help with that? Is there enough parking? Can we actually access a place that we want to meet up? And does it require high clearance vehicles? Can somebody driving a Prius get in there? Or does anybody need a ride and we can carpool? So those are some of the things that I think of when I'm thinking about our Nature Journal Club actually getting together. And how far is it for people to have to drive? And do they need help with that? Those are some of the ideas. And then Billy Joe talked about youth who may, like during the last 2 years, may not have had access to outdoors. And how do we look at the perspective of where you are on the 14th floor of a high-rise building and how that relates to nature? And I'd love to have Billy Joe come in on that too, because she really is well-versed in that too.
Sure. So I was chatting with everyone and just sort of discussing some of the barriers that we came across while we were doing online with our kids. And I think I've spoken about some of this in the past, but we have kiddos in our school boards who are really coming from sort of all facets of life and in a lot of urban centers. And so we sort of wanted to change the way we were thinking about things and the way that we were framing it. So instead of saying go outside, well, that's not always an option for everyone, especially in the online place that we were at, because parents could be working, they could be at home with older siblings. You can't go outside. They're in an apartment building. They don't have access. They're in a basement apartment where there's no windows. So we tried to change the framing of it to say, look at a window. And then when the kids in the high-rise apartment were like, well, I'm on the 14th floor. And you're like, awesome. What's your perspective of your neighborhood from that height? And then the kid who has access to a window at street level, what is the access? What does it look like from that perspective? And then the kiddo who's in the basement apartment, whether they have a window or not, they have a door. And so we would always say, go to the door, don't go out, but you can go to the door. What are you seeing from ground level? Like, one of the things that we would use is like squirrels, like the people in the apartment buildings, the squirrels might look little, but you could really see them sort of jumping from tree to tree. Street level, you're seeing it differently. From basement level, you're seeing what those little critters are looking like up close as they run past your window. So there's all of these different perspectives. So trying to change the framing to make it less about what someone can't do, but more about the perspectives of what they are able to do. And so, we run into some of the other issues with language as well. We get a lot of families that are immigrating into this area, and we get a lot of people from countries that it's not safe to go outside. You're coming from a country where if you go outside, you will be eaten by something. And so there is a fear with that as well. And so then that comes into our part, is to educate on what's going on around here, and then to understand where you can go within the city, and to make sure that we're not saying you have to drive 3 hours out to this conservation area. Like, no, the sidewalk will have dandelions growing. You can grow your own fruits and vegetables. And then you're going to sort of talk about, well, what does that mean to grow your own fruits and vegetables or an herb? Look at your own pets, all these different things to try and get over that the obstacle of not having access to nature, and like Stephanie said, nature is everywhere. It's in the fridge. It's in the bugs that are living in the corner. We used to get kiddos to run through the house and be like, someone go and find me a spider web because there's nature living in your house. And then they would run back and be like, oh my gosh, Miss Reed, I found the spiders in the basement. And be like, yes, let's journal it, right? Like there's nature everywhere. And that's what I really, sort of along with Sarah was, finding that connection with what Stephanie was saying as well, is that it's literally everywhere. And then you can really, like, if you really want to nerd out and they're like, I don't have any of those things. You're like, but do you have a table? Because a table is made of wood. What tree do you think it came from? What country do you think it came from? What is the process? Because nature journaling is about your observation and your wonder. And so if we're talking even the year of questions, let's question where it came from. How was it made? What is the process? What do we know? What don't we know? You can nature journal literally anything and make it connect to so many things. So that is sort of one of the things that we sort of look at when we're trying to think about accessibility to nature.
That is some really great ideas. This ideas of what are you able to do versus what can you do, taking advantage of what you have around you, and access to nature physically or virtually, or from your 14th floor to the basement. For live things, is it safe? What are the sidewalks like? What are the curb cuts like there? What are the restrooms like there? Is there parking? Is there a day use fee? All those sorts of questions are important things for ourselves to be asking when we're developing live events, when we are encouraging people to interact with nature, so people aren't thinking, oh yeah, this is something you do when you go to the national park. Comment just came in, is there a bus? Public transportation.
One thing that we found during COVID as well was, I know we are talking a lot about the fact that Zoom has really made things accessible, but there was a lot of kiddos in our school board that did not have computers or access to internet. And so that was a huge undertaking by the school boards throughout, at least Ontario, that I know, was that every time we went into lockdown, getting Chromebooks out to all those kids. But again, sometimes a family has, 5 kiddos, they're maybe not able to get a Chromebook from the school for each of those kiddos, right? So some are on iPads, some are on cell phones, some are sharing and doing some classes recorded and some not. So just keeping in mind that although we are all here and we see the benefit of having that, not everyone has a computer or technology or internet access. Also, if they live super rurally, they might just not have access because it's not available. And that is a lot of stuff in Ontario. As you go further north, there just isn't internet.
Yeah, you folks are still doing things with passenger pigeons up there. It's, you put your lesson on the leg of the little pigeon.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
When there's a big storm, we're having a connection issue.
Exactly.
So let's take I'd love to hear a report out from. So thank you folks so much for reporting out from that group. Again, we are scratching the surface of this idea of accessibility, and I think that we're seeing kind of here just how large the cloth is, and that's really, really helpful to us. Sarah, thank you. Billy Joe, thank you. Is there somebody from the group that was talking about access to nature journaling that can report back from that group? Let me take a look at my gallery view. Is there somebody who is in the nature journaling group who would be able to report back to us? And while you are, Rosa, Rosa, thank you for being with us, and we'd love to hear a little bit about the discussion that you had there. Oh, wait, hold on. You are currently muted.
There we go. Now I'm unmuted. Susan, in particular, made some great points, and I remembered to save the chat. So let me see if I can get back to those. She summarized, as we got toward the end, barriers to nature journaling: monetary, getting supplies, the feeling that you need expensive supplies to do it properly, internal and mental aspects like confidence or intimidation, feeling like you're not sciencey enough, physical aspects, all the way down to like how you hold a pencil or how you manage your materials when you're in the field trying to nature journal. Can you crouch down or can you get higher up? Are you limited in those ways? Another thing that came up, oh, I don't see it in the chat itself. We started talking about sources of toned paper in your household. So I believe it was Marcia who brought up the idea of just taking a toilet paper roll, cutting it down the middle and folding it out. There you have some cardboard toned paper that you can draw on. But one thing that I brought up in response to that is that looking for reusable or recycled materials like that can feel like, a quirky, fun thing to do if all of our needs are met, but it can feel like a shameful, stigmatizing thing if that's like all you can afford. And so we played around with some ideas about how to reframe that as resourcefulness and reusing and recycling in ways that benefit our entire community. And also we get a fun new art supply to play with. We talked a little about socioeconomic aspects of stuff. So perhaps, like Billy Joe was saying, somebody might say, I don't have any nature. And then you can ask, well, why is that? And a local example that I gave is that when I drive down San Pablo Avenue, which goes from Emeryville at one end to Richmond, that's at least my stomping grounds, go to Richmond, I see more or less trees along the side of the sidewalk. When I'm in Berkeley, the ground cover is beautiful. It's shady as you drive through. There's dappled light. Then when I get to Albany, there's fewer trees. When I get to El Cerrito, there's even fewer there. And when I get to Richmond, it is sidewalk. It is concrete. There are not lovely trees lining the sidewalks. And we can ask the question, why is that? How did that happen? And that's both a nature question, but it's also a broader question of understanding your community and how a lot of interconnecting aspects of society have caused you to have this situation. We've got some stuff going on in the chat too. I see that Ivea brought up about clothing, that can also be a barrier. If we need special clothing, special shoes, those kinds of things, where do we get them? Can we borrow them? I'm sorry, I'm peering over here through my progressives at the chat. Does anyone else in our group have some thoughts about stuff we brought up? Oh, I do remember another thing. I am interested in us collectively coming up with what we think is sort of a minimum viable nature journaling kit, pricing that at retail, but also perhaps each of us in our groups locally can find maybe like a locally owned art store that can give us a break on pricing, so that we can make kits. Obviously, we might want to look into grant funding. I don't know if the foundation can help with that. I don't want to talk about the money part so much, the organizational money part of it, but I think we can come up with a limited kit that is still full of artistic possibility. And then we need to demonstrate with that kit. So we often say you just need a pen and a notebook, but then, as we've pointed out, we don't see pages that are just done with a pen and a notebook when we look at, say, the Facebook group for Nature Journal Club. So I think that the website or the magazine or another aspect of the Facebook group should be people demoing this. Like, I worked with this kit all month. Look at the stuff I did. Rebecca Rolnick has got a quick start guide that she has shared with us in the chat.
Yeah, what a great idea. So not so you're talking about that, how to destigmatize these low-cost supplies. If we're saying you can do this, but I wouldn't do that, that sends a huge message that really you need to be able to upgrade to this if you're really gonna do it. You give us lots of interesting ideas about also people feeling intimidated. You led with early on sort of the idea of, you looked at everybody's stuff and the book that I wrote and you said, well, that's great if you're an artist. Right?
And coming back to your book after being a part of the community, I hear your voice in it. It is not an intimidating voice. It is an inviting voice. And even so, I felt intimidated.
Right.
So that's sort of the thing I'm trying to point out. I don't think that you did anything wrong, or that I want to question the book, but also, how can we take those messages and make them even more inviting or less overwhelming? Now, when I look at the guide to nature drawing and journaling, I feel a sense of abundance of resources and excitement. Look at all these different things I could try to do. When I first looked at it, though, I felt like, oh gosh, look at all these things I don't know how to do.
Right. Right. Yep. And so we need to be really, to make this accessible to people who are kind of approaching this from a place where they haven't developed these skills, really being conscious of what a barrier the judgments and expectations would be. Thank you so much with for this kind of overview of what that group was talking about. We have one other group, and then we're going to be taking our break for lunch. What I'd like to do is I'd like to hear from the group that was talking about barriers to community. And then I would like to sort of finally return to both Rosa and Scott to see if they have any final comments, thoughts, and ideas, and also anybody else in the community that has a kind of again, we will be visiting these ideas, but if there's something that you think is really helpful just to drop into our conversation to get our brains percolating for the next time that we take up this discussion, that would be wonderful. So I would like to invite Sidney on to discuss, add you into the spotlight here, and you can now unmute.
Hello.
Hey there.
All right. I was in the discussion about community, and just very naturally, we didn't talk a lot about nature journaling. We've really identified that for us, just the broader sense of community was really something that we needed to chat about. The first thing that came up was that pretty much everyone in that discussion had experienced some level of social anxiety that really limited their ability to enter a space of community and feel welcome, regardless of whether that community was welcoming or not. It can be hard for these individuals to believe that. And so we kind of talked about how to extend a welcoming hand to those people who it takes a little extra encouragement to feel invited and welcome. We didn't get too many specific examples of that, but an overarching theme that felt very comfortable was this idea of a web of connection. We have very good, strong leaders in this community, Jack and Ivea in particular, but we were talking about how can we extend that to include every person in the community so that it's not only resting on Jack and Ivea and others' shoulders, but each individual in this community is aware of each other individual in this community. And if we notice that somebody seems a little shy or a little nervous, or we can tell that they want to share, but maybe they don't feel like they are allowed. Having all of us have the awareness to reach out to those people and be like, hey, how can I support you today? Did you want to share? I noticed you had your hand up. And then more specifically, we talked about how can we help those people who are so present in this community, Ivea, Jack, Rebecca, all the people who facilitate specifically, how can we as a community give back to them and make sure that their needs are being met, that they're not pouring from an empty cup, that they have the help that they need, that people are checking in with them as well. I mean, we barely scratched the surface of community in that talk, but those were the main points of like, first of all, how do we get people in the door and feeling comfortable and welcome? And then how do we strengthen the web of community so that no one person is having to do that for everyone, but that we are all aware and have each other's backs.
I'd like to add that building community, particularly online, is such an ongoing thing. So we want to, I think, be mindful that there's not like a thing we do at the beginning and then we've made it accessible and we don't have to worry about it again, but that it's an ongoing process that we can keep revisiting about like, how well are we doing now? And now how well are we doing? Who has entered the community who wasn't part of it before? And iterating on that rather than like having a big burst at the outset and then maybe letting some of those accessibility interventions that we're coming up with, we want to keep those strong and not let them sort of trickle away.
This is a, that we should not expect ourselves to have all the answers right at this point. That this is going to be a work in progress, and we should always be on the lookout for ways to improve how we do this, and be willing to make little modifications to, or big modifications to what we're doing. That is, and Sidney, what you were talking about, kind of the web of connections. Thinking about how we, I believe that one of the most important things that we have are relationships, and that can be relationships with each other, relationships with natural places and elements. And how do we strengthen that web of relationships? The more that we feel ourselves supported by that web, the more we are able to support that web. And there's a real positive feedback loop. And also in this community, how can we empower other people to step into their strength and to step into a role within that community that allows them to participate as fully as they wish.
I'd like to point out that we're already doing this as evidenced by me. I feel welcomed to engage with the Educators Forum, even though I am not officially teaching at this point. And I feel invited to the larger community by seeing the willingness and even the joy of people wanting to take up this conversation. And I have not worked a full-time job for 12 years. I am a little frightened about this level of collaboration and engagement, and it's exhilarating, and I am so grateful. And I look forward to us doing, more of that and finding people who, didn't think they could have this community and saying, guess what, you can. Here, we've thought of some things. I would like to drop a couple links in the chat if people would like to look at them before next week. So when I was poking around the internet, I discovered a group that used to be called the Center for Applied Special Technology, but now just calls themselves CAST. Their mission is to transform education design and practice until learning has no limits. They have universal design for learning guidelines, and in particular, including the concept of equity in there. And they've done a lot of the work that we don't need to redo. So here is their UDL guidelines. And this may be familiar to those of you who are working as professional educators right now, but it was new for me to see this fleshed out so well. And then another thing I came across.
So this is at cast.org.
Yeah. And then informalscience.org. I'm curious about whether anybody here has heard about this initiative. It is supported by the National Science Foundation, and they are talking about informal STEM learning and how to promote that. And not just, for school children, but for lifelong learning. And one thing I haven't heard us talk about is intergenerational stuff. And we have elders who may be gradually losing access to community or broadly nature. And we also have a lot of kids who may need elders in their lives who can support them in ways that maybe their individual parents or school systems can't. And so looking for ways that we can bridge that gap of generations, I think would also improve access and bring more people in who haven't previously thought that this was a place for them. Let me see if I got.
And that was something that was wonderful about the live events that we used to have, is that they would
I'm sure.
Just these wonderful intergenerational things. There would be the little ones and there would be the old, then we'd have elders. And the elders would see the little ones just ready to dive into everything, and the young ones are looking at the elders saying like, wow, I guess it just sort of normalizes this whole behavior and everybody's doing it together. That was really, really fun.
I loved at the conference hearing Amy Tan and Fiona in conversation and modeling that for the group. Amy's deference to Fiona as her mentor is beautiful. I'm so happy that that gets highlighted at the conference.
That's right. So before we wrap here, Rebecca, I saw that you were dropping into the chat some thoughts and ideas that were, I thought, deeply profound. I was wondering if you'd feel comfortable coming on and just sharing those with folks who haven't read the chat or are not going to have access to the chat. Thumbs up. All right. You may now unmute, and I'm going to spotlight you just like that. Bam. Hey.
Hi. Do you mean the stuff I just wrote about the intergenerational things or something else?
I was, you were talking, first sort of, I noticed what you're doing in the thread when you're talking about how you don't need to, that we are all worthy of that support in the web.
Yeah, so I wrote that this is when we were talking about that web of support, and we're all supporting each other. You know, the leaders in the community and leaders supporting other people and other people supporting the leaders, but also all the other connections aside from that laterally and just everybody. And feeling that support and encouragement from each other. And I wrote in the chat, you don't have to give a certain amount to deserve being supported by the web. The support can come first. And I think Ivea or other people were also writing, and Sarah were also writing about how people, yeah, just about how people can support each other. I don't remember the exact things, but, so I feel like accepting help from others can also be a challenge for many people, even when other people want to give it, because we're so conditioned that you shouldn't have to accept it, that you, you know, then you owe something to somebody, or it means that then you're, you know, less than somebody else, or that you should, you know, you're being pitied by somebody else, when actually in the healthy community, it's everybody has something to give. Everybody has something to offer all the time, even if that's not money, if that's time, if that's skills, if that's encouragement, it could be something. Everybody has something to offer, and everybody is able to receive something from the community. And this also goes to the idea of gift economies, which I've been reading about a lot also. And this idea that I feel like something I felt within myself is this kind of, you have to give a certain amount before you've kind of earned the right to ask for help or to ask for what you want or need. And that doesn't have to be true. You can come in, and especially because a lot of times people need to have a certain amount of support before they're able to give. You know, whether we're talking about people having low income or disabilities or something, and, you know, needing to get this access in whatever shape or form that is, then, you know, Ivea said something, how can we let everyone shine and celebrate each of us? But that can only happen if everybody has what they need to be able to be there and participate in the first place, and then their gifts can really shine. So I guess I was just thinking, you know, whatever it is that somebody needs, don't be afraid to ask, because we're a community, and that's why we're a community. Like, that's the purpose of a community, is that we're here for each other. And whatever it is that you need or even want, you can ask for it. And, you know, people aren't always able to help in exactly that way at that time, but you can still ask, and you can still ask again. And yeah, sometimes people need to have the support first and then can share their gifts.
Rebecca, I think that's a wonderful note to end this conversation on. What we're trying to do together is to try to create that space. And I think that more that we intentionally articulate these things, it really helps us see it, and then it's going to help us do it. Both in the nature of the community which we're making here, and also in the Wild Wonder Foundation, which is a tool in service of that community. Thank you so much for sharing that and articulating that with us. So what I would like us to do is, if you've been taking some sketch notes on this, then to go back into those and highlight things that are really jumping out at you. See if you can ask yourself a question that didn't occur to you before, or if there's an idea from what we've been talking about here that is starting to crystallize as something that you want to kind of take forward and play with. It's really easy to watch something like this, participate in this, and if we're not really intentional about kind of finding a nugget to kind of go forward with intentionally, or to kind of highlight in that in our thinking in some way, it's easy to have an experience like this but not have it change the way which we think. So take a look back over your notes and see if there are, what for you is jumping out as sort of the seed for the next level of your thinking about this, because we will be taking these conversations and bringing them to deeper levels in future conversations. Also, kind of relating to this, this last weekend I was teaching a class at the Monterey Bird Festival, and there was a fellow there with who was participating from a wheelchair, who I found particularly inspiring, and I invited him to come on one of my Thursday workshops and to talk to us about what he has done to help himself and to help other people have more access to the wonder of the world around them. So I think that will be, I want to kind of highlight that. So look on my calendar for a conversation, a live conversation with Paul, and I think you're gonna love it. And I want to again thank our special guests. This workshop. Rosa and Scott, I'm really grateful to your insight and wisdom, helping this community think about these ideas more deeply. And for all the other folks who participated, also want to send a shout out to our my co-hosts Avea Moore and Billy Joe Reed. Thank you so much for the work which you do. Helping make these conversations just such, for me, it's this weekly brain buster that really stirs me up and gets me thinking about how can we do this better. I think what we're seeing with the evolution of this community would not happen without the intentionality that is coming from these conversations here in the Educators Forum. So to all of you, thank you so much for that. And I look forward to being together with you again soon. Want to encourage everybody to pop over to the gallery view right now, and we can wave goodbye to each other. Thank you for being here. And let's see, I'm going to remove my spot. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye-bye.